Jeff Bryan is good friends with Steve, and it was the Bryan family that really came to me some months ago to suggest that we might engage Steve to come in and speak. And to be honest, we kind of thought, well, we'll wait and see on that. And then there were some incidents in our community that really brought the issue of suicide front and center for all of us. And that's when it became really compelling. I kind of got back in touch with Jeff about that suggestion. And so that's how it all kind of unfolded. So anyway, Jeff, just maybe introduce your friend to us. Thank you.
Well, I first met Steve back in 1995 when we were both active with the Los Angeles chapter of the National Speakers Association, which is an association for professional speakers. And at the time, the main impression I had of Steve was that he was an incredibly funny guy. But what I discovered over time was what a great heart he had and what sincerity he had, particularly on the topic we're going to be speaking about tonight. I'm not going to steal any of your talk. I'm sure you'll explain why this is a subject of personal importance to you. But Steve is one of the most accomplished speakers I've ever heard. And I'm sure we're in for an incredible talk tonight. And I hope that from tonight, we as a community can make a commitment to turn around the factors that have led to the tragedies of the last year and a half or so. And so Steve, I'd like to introduce you, Steve Stewart, and take it away.
And in our church we have a lot of white hair. There's a lot of people that are in their 70s and 80s and 90s, and I have to say that they are in remarkably good health. They're 93, 94, still driving and not scaring the pants off everybody in town because of the fact that they're still driving. They're really in good health, but they're in their 70s and 80s and 90s, and every Thursday afternoon, a bunch of us gather. If I'm in town, we gather at the Hometown Buffet in Oceanside, and we get there by 3 o'clock. I'm Mr. 259 because at 3 o'clock they go from the lunch special to the dinner special, and it goes up about $3, and so we all try to get there before 3 o'clock. And so I usually get the last seat at the table. They get there about 2:30. And one day, and because there's anywhere from a half dozen to maybe 2 dozen, depending on the day, that gather there, and you can't talk. If you're at one long table, you can't talk to everybody. You can really talk to 1, 2, 3, 4, and who's sitting across the table is 5. So I have a salad, and I talk to these 5, and then I'll go get something else to eat, and I'll bring it back to the table, a main meal, and then I'll sit somewhere else and then talk to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different people, and then by the time we have coffee, I'm at the other end of the table. And so I get a chance to say hello to more people in the process. And one day I was sitting there at the end of the table, having my cup of coffee, and somebody was kind enough to ask me about what it is that I'm doing. They know what I've been doing for a long time, but this business about the teen suicide is different. And so they were kind enough to ask, and I was remarking about the difficulty of having people call me back. When you think about it, it's probably not a surprise that when you call somebody and the subject is suicides of our children, I'm not the first person they want to call back. And so sometimes they don't call back at all, sometimes they don't call back until days or even weeks after the fact. So I was remarking on that, and the problem is that I have such a very, very ugly topic. Honest to goodness, I'd rather stand here for an hour and a half and do card tricks. Something that we could all do, something would be entertaining. It wouldn't accomplish anything, and I don't know any card tricks, so I can't do that. Thank you for laughing at that. I was speaking one time in Seattle, and I did a joke about something, and I could see in the faces that people weren't sure if it was okay to laugh. And I said, it's okay to laugh. Humor doesn't have to hurt. And there's a woman sitting right about where you're sitting who said, no, but at least it'll be funny. Oh, great, now you laugh. So I was commenting on the difficulty of having people call back, and it's this ugly topic. And I said, by way of explanation, I said, for example, did you know that there are suicide statistics for children as young as 5? And as soon as I said that, the man on my, that's him. The man sitting on my right, that's Bert, Bert is a dear, sweet man. He's a retired pastor. He's been retired almost as long as he was active, because he's 94 years old. He's blind. He has the macular degeneration, and with no hearing aids, he's deaf as a post. But he is such a good, dear, sweet man. I wouldn't hurt him for the world. I love his. I call him my foster father. I've put my feet under his table at a lot of Easters and Father's Days and Mother Day dinners and such. He's a good man. And as soon as I said that about the childhood at the age of 5, I felt Bert shut down from the conversation. I didn't have any eye contact. I didn't have the courage to look and see what happened, but I felt it. It's like you have 2 soup cans and a string between them, and somebody puts the other can down. It just stopped the communication. But you can't say, I hope I didn't hurt his feelings, but you can't say something like that and not explain it. So I shifted in my seat. I had to look to see if he's wearing his hearing aid or not. And I lowered my voice to make myself harder to hear. You can't say what I said and then not offer an explanation. It just takes 30, 40 seconds. So I turned to this side of the table, finished the explanation, turned back to the center and raised my voice again. And Bert said, "Steve," I thought, oh no, maybe he heard it. Said, "A moment ago, did you say that there were suicide statistics for children as young as 5? Oh man, that means he had the hearing aid and he got me word for word. And I said, "Yes." And Bert said, "That was him. That was him." Well, look at him. He's not 5 years old. The man's 94 years old. If he was 5 at the time, that was 89 years ago. Whatever happened worked out that day. Whatever the problem was, he survived that. And I really want to know, and I know that it has a happy outcome, so I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, he was 5 years old, had this hard scrabble life in Louisiana. He was the youngest of a large family, lots of kids. And one day he and his mother were in town, and they saw the posters up that the circus was coming to town. And so, if you're 5 years old, and there's going to be elephants and giraffes and tigers and lions and bears, this is a pretty good thing. So he immediately wants to go to the circus. When can we go to the circus? And his mother said, "When it comes to town, one of us will take you." And so he waited for the circus to come to town. The problem was, when the circus did come to town, everybody was busy. They were busy making a living. It's like 1922, 23. Everybody is working in this hard scrabble life. And they're all too busy to take little Birdie to the circus. And so he launched into a pity party. He's feeling so sorry for himself, and he's sitting in a swing all afternoon, and a swing hanging from the tree in the backyard, and everybody's too busy for him. They're always telling him, "Bert, get out of the way, get out of the way, you're in the way, step aside, get out of the way. Nobody has any time for him, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I think I'll go eat some worms." He's feeling awful for himself. And then he had an idea. About a week before, sitting at the dinner table, his mother remarked to his father that they'd gotten a letter and that so-and-so, a member of the family, had recently committed suicide. Well, Bert's 5. He didn't know what that is, so he said, "What's that?" And his mother explained, "Well, that's if somebody kills himself." And that was the end of the conversation. That's all he knows about it. Now, a week later, having this pity party in the backyard, because nobody will take him to the circus, he says that there was nothing else he could do. He realized that his only solution to this was he's just going to have to kill himself. And he said, "All right, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. All right, I'm going to kill myself." Now, his weapon of choice was the only weapon at hand. It was these 2 little 5-year-old fists of fury. He is going to do himself in with these 2 little 5-year-old fists. And you do as much as you can, and then he spit and realizes he's not hurt, and he's still sitting on the swing, and he could see them through the kitchen window that they're setting the table and about to sit down and have dinner. So he thought, well, I'll just go inside and have dinner with everybody else. And that was the end of the story. The reason that little Bert was still alive is that the only weapon that he had available to him were these 5-year-old fists. What if instead it had been in the afternoon, and he was standing in the kitchen where they had all the sharp knives? On a farmhouse, they got a lot of sharp knives. What if instead, they had a bathroom, 1923, they had a bathroom inside the house. What if instead he'd been standing in the bathroom when he had this idea, where his father kept the straight razor in the shaving mud? Remember, the men used to have a shaving mud with the soap in it, they work up some soap and then use a straight razor. What if he'd been standing inside the bedroom, the bathroom, when he had that thought? And the straight razor was the weapon he had instead of his two 5-year-old fists. What if he'd been standing inside his parents' bedroom where everybody in the house knew that Papa kept a loaded gun in the nightstand drawer? What if that was his weapon of choice? Bert did not understand life and death. At 5, you can kind of understand is and not is, or is not. Would that be better? Is not? Okay, I'll go with is not. Lighten up, folks. It's just a simple. He understood that much. And the reason he's still alive was by coincidence, he happened to have non-lethal weapons. Back in those days, nobody had trigger locks on their firearms. And if anybody in this room has a pistol in the nightstand drawer, chances are, because you keep it available in case you really need it, you're not going to go look for the lock. Chances are it's a loaded pistol with no trigger. The reason that there are suicide statistics is because there are age groupings. And when you see age groupings, what they'll do is they'll say, let's say 30 years old. And then the grouping is not 30 to 40, because as soon as you get halfway through the 30s, you're closer to 40 than to 30. It's easy to go 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54. The center, the 10-year center on the main age, the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And then when you break it down below 20, they go in 5-year increments. So the numbers are really 0 to 4. And by the way, there are no 0 to 4-year-old suicide. Doesn't happen. The kids don't have the concept of life or not life. They don't have any of that. They have the concept, if I cry, I get what I want, or I don't cry, I get what I want. They're good at that, but they're not going to die. They don't understand death at all. Then you have the grouping 5 years to 9 years, and then 10 years to 15, and 15 to 20, and then around that time you start boosting it to 10-year increments. The difference between somebody who's 35 and 45 is this. But the difference between somebody who's 1 and 8 is this. See what difference that makes? So that's why there are all those numbers. The other number up there that I want to talk about was the fact that the suicide numbers are on the growth. It takes a long time to do a 40 years. Well, how long does it take you to do a 40-year study?
40 years.
Excellent, math majors. Well, it takes such a long time to do that, and so the most current long-term study that anybody refers to now is this one right here. It comes from the Centers for Disease Control. And what they did was they counted up all of the suicides year by age group from 0, which is non-existent, to 5 to 10, which is very, very rare. But there are instances where a child has the ideation for suicide, and they don't know really what it means, but they have this idea, and they just know nobody wants to die. Nobody who commits suicide and knows what they're doing wants to die. Everybody just wants the pain to stop. So the study took these ages, and what they found was this. In those 40 years, from the mid-50s to the mid-90s, suicides increased by 78% across the total population. That is virtually 2% a year, after year, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%. 2% is not a lot, but over 40 years it adds up to 78%. That is a dramatic increase in the number of suicides. That's across the board, all ages in the United States. On the other hand, the suicide numbers for teenagers in the same period of time increased by 600%. That is evidence that life got more complex. From the mid-50s to the mid-90s, life got incredibly more complex, in particular for teenagers. In fact, if you look at this, that 78% right there includes the adults and also the children in that 600%. If you take the children out of the numbers, across the board, just the adult numbers, probably only go up about 40 or 50%. But because there's such a dramatic increase by this 60% right here, there we go, and then the numbers grow a little more. So how many teenagers are we losing? And as of the year 2003, the number, according to the Centers for Disease Control, is about 4,600 teenagers suiciding in the United States. That's a lot. Perhaps you know somebody who's tried. Remember, we were going to talk about the girls attempting more than the boys. However, do you know Covenant House? Do you know the name Covenant House? Covenant House is a Catholic charity, and it's a wonderful charity. It does for runaway teens essentially the same thing that Salvation Army does for other people who are homeless. There are Covenant houses in a number of major cities. There's one here in Los Angeles. When I lived for 25 years in Claremont before I moved down to Oceanside. The one when I was in Claremont, I fell in love with this charity, so that was always an object of donations and contributions. I wish we had one in San Diego. The one in LA is right off the Hollywood freeway. If you look up Covenant House, you'll find that. I wish we had one in San Diego, because in San Diego today, we have between 6,000 and 7,000 children between the ages of 12 and 17 who are sleeping on the streets every night. I'm not counting Chula Vista and National City and La Mesa or Spring Valley. I'm talking just the city of San Diego. 6,000 to 7,000 children every night who are sleeping behind dumpsters and under bridges and below the piers and in cars that were left unlocked overnight. They're looking for a place to stay, and they don't have somebody. We could really use a Covenant House in San Diego. Well, Covenant House says the numbers of suicides has changed, and they have this long-standing commitment to the welfare of these teen runaways. You know what they do? They give teens, they go out, solicit, and try to bring the kids back, or at least leave them an address that they can come back to. Because the teenagers have run away from home. They're 12, 13, and 14, and 17, 11 years old, who are sleeping on the knees. They didn't know that they were going to end up sleeping on the streets and behind dumpsters. That was not the plan when they left the house, because they had $40 that they had saved up. And whether you have $40 or $400, it's gone. It's just gone. It doesn't take that many hamburgers to go through the $40 or $400. And so now they're desperate, and yet they know what they're up against. They know how they're sleeping on the streets at night. And it's not enough to send them home. What kind of a hellhole is your home that you won't leave sleeping on the street and go back to your home at night? So they take them off the street, they give them some food to eat, without charge. They give them things to drink, water to drink. They give them baths and showers. The kids have been wearing the same clothes for weeks to months. Same outfits, the only clothes they have. They show up with the clothes in their bag. And so they've got these rancid clothes. They take those back and say, I'm going to wash that. A lot of times they just have to put them in the trash. They're not salvageable. And they give them clean clothes to wear. They give them counseling, and then they help them get a job where they can be supported. They are always encouraged to go back home if there's a home to go back to. And a lot of times, no. Mom has remarried, and the next boyfriend's not so interested in having a teenage kid in the house, and so there's just no place to go back to. And Covenant House, bless their hearts, gives these kids a place to go. Covenant House says the numbers have changed. And what they say is that as of year 2010, that there are between 5,000 and 6,000 teen suicides in the United States every year. And most of us are just waiting for the CDC to consolidate those numbers and narrow it down. Is it 5? Is it 6? Is it 5,500? And we don't know yet, because there's a lag in reporting time. Because of this, we have a lot of kids who are at risk. You have kids that are at risk right here in La Crescenta. As far as I know, in this one valley, which is kind of narrowly defined, you're not lost in the wasteland of Los Angeles. That's probably why you're here. You got away from Los Angeles to have a community of your own. In this one valley, as far as I know, there have been, in the last 12 months, there have been 3 boys and 1 girl who have gone to take their lives. It's actually 2 boys. 1 boy jumped from the roof of La Cañada High School, and then another boy jumped from the roof of his school just a few blocks from here. You drive by, you know which one it is. It's the tallest building on campus. You don't jump from the short roof, you jump from the tall roof. There was a girl who was known to this community right here, because she would come here with activities with the youth group, come by herself, not as I understand, not with parents, and she's gone. And then there was one boy, other boy that we know of, who shot himself and survived. He's, I'm guessing that's decades of therapy to come past that. Because, how do you shoot yourself in? He should have died. He should have died. And I'm thankful that he did not. But those are 4. But those are not the only 4. Those are the only 4 we know of, but it's not the only 4. Remember, he said that girls attempt suicide 4 times as often as the boys do. So if those are the ones we know about, and only one of them is female, there are, in the last 2 years, I'll bet the mortgage on this, in the last 2 years, I'll bet there's 20 other female suicide attempts. And we don't know about it because nobody talks about it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it won't show up in the media. When my son died, it was never in the newspapers. They didn't ask me for that. Sometimes the newspapers just won't print that. But they know about it because they have somebody who's on staff who calls the coroner's office. That's part of their beat. Somebody has to call the coroner's office once a week and say, anything interesting? And they'll go over the numbers. And sometimes they'll just say, let's leave that one alone. So my son's, I'm fine with that, by the way. My son's news was never in the paper. It was a limited amount of sharing that you necessarily want to do for that. It's good for us to know about some, but there are many that we don't know about. And it's entirely likely in this last 12 months that there is another teen suicide. I'm only counting 12 to 20 years old. Suicide among teenagers in each community is somewhere between 2nd and 3rd most common cause of death. For college students, it's number 2. Once you're out of high school, you think you're out of that, the odds actually go up. You're more likely to die in college by suicide than you are in high school, as ugly as that is. So what are we going to learn from this? The question is, we're all sitting right here, and we're wondering, what does this have to do with me, with my son, with my daughter? I've got a teenager, 2 teenagers, and you hear about these losses, and you want to be certain, what can we do that would keep that from that news appearing at our house? And I applaud you, if that's you, I applaud you for being here, for examining that question. What can you do about this? I had a unique experience that I'm deeply, deeply grateful for. One day I was in a Christian bookstore down in Oceanside, and I was walking the aisles, between the aisles, and I was looking for some titles. No title in particular, but really the subject areas. And while I was doing that, this young sales clerk, I think she was about 19, walked over and said, "Can I help you find anything?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "I'm looking for books on the subject of grace, forgiveness, and teen suicide." I think she was a little taken aback by the combination. But she said, "Okay, let me see what I can find. I'll be back in a couple of minutes." And she took off from the store. "Oh, well, this will be interesting. I wonder what she'll find, because I'm looking myself." And a few minutes later, she came back. And by the way, she came back with a couple of pretty good candidates on the subjects that I was looking for. I was impressed. I was impressed because it means that she really heard what I had to say. And I was impressed because she'd only been working there a couple of days, and in just a couple of days, she knew her store's inventory well enough to go directly to the shelves, find the books, and bring them back to me. I was impressed by that. And she came back with these, and I said, "Thank you very much." I was looking at them, and she said, "If you don't mind my asking, why those 3 subjects?" That is a pretty good question for a 19-year-old minimum wage worker in a bookstore. That is a pretty good question. It shows curiosity and insight. So So I said, well, sure. And I told her what I'm doing, and I told her about the topic and about the suicide and about losing my son and such. My intention at that point to get in front of high school age teens to talk on the subject. And she seemed satisfied with that. And I said, well, now it's my turn. May I ask you why you asked me that question? And she kind of smiled and said, well, said I heard you better. I knew better. You better what? She said, when I was in high school, when she was a sophomore, she said I had a rough stretch of time and I was having a lot of troubles. And I had decided that it wasn't worth it and I was just going to kill myself. And she had means and motive. There's a reason she was doing this. She knew where she was going to do it. She set a deadline on this. Her deadline was on a Friday afternoon after school before her parents came home from work. That was her moment. That's when she's going to do it. So she really spent the next week and a half saying goodbye to people without being obvious about saying goodbye. In retrospect, they would hear it and understand what she had done, but she was just kind of saying goodbye so that she could exit thinking she had done what she needed to do. And then she said one day, it was a Wednesday, Friday is her deadline. Wednesday, 2 days before, she said a speaker came to our school one day and something he said changed my mind. And I realized I didn't have to die. And then she said, oh, I know another book. And then she scampered off to go get another book. But right now, you're thinking the same thing I was thinking, right? What in the world did he say? What was it that he said that turned her entire orientation from, I'm going to die on Friday, to, I don't have to die at all? What was, knowing what he said could be valuable to somebody like me. I couldn't wait for her to come back. She came back with another book. That would have been a pretty good book on the subject. And when she came back, I said, I don't mean to pry, but knowing what he said could be important and valuable to me. Do you mind if I ask you what he said? And she said, well, I knew better. I'd heard this from my parents and from teachers and all, but the difference is what he said at that moment, I believed. I believed him in that moment. I heard it, but I never really believed it until that moment. What he said was that I mattered. That I mattered. That I made a difference. That there was a place for me in this world. And I wasn't feeling that on Tuesday. Wednesday, when she heard it, she was feeling it and believing it. That there's this great big jigsaw in the world, and each of us, there's this jagged little piece that's about this big, and it's perfectly in place when she's in that place. But if she doesn't go through to her own finish line, that piece is going to be missing. It'll have to be built by a piece that's of a different shape. She said, I believed it. And I knew at that moment that from that point on, anytime I had teenagers in a room in front of me, there was something that I was going to have to say. And I would say it every time. I would say this: you've had dark days. And you're going to have darker days than you've ever had before. It's going to happen. But no matter what anybody says to you in a fit of anger, no matter what anybody does when you feel betrayed by someone that you consider a friend, but no matter what the devil whispers in your ear, because he wants you to fail, trying to cause you to fail, no matter whatever feels like a loss of love, you matter. You're important. You make a difference. The world needs you. If you're the kind of person who decides that God rounds off the corners, that he shoots for the averages, that there's nothing unique about you, if you think that God just kind of puts things together and rounds up to be even numbers, then look at a snowflake. No two are alike. That is attention to detail. Look at your fingerprints. Look at your fingerprints. Not only is there nobody, that is detail. Not only is there nobody else anywhere in the world, in all humanity, that has the same fingerprints that you have, you even have two that are the same yourself. Every one of these is different from every one of these. How is that not God saying that he pays attention to detail, that everything, every detail is important, that we were created by Him and for His purposes. God, that is God saying, I know who you are. So when you think that God just kind of rounds things off, you miss the details. The details are in there. So you matter, you count, and you make a difference. Here comes the ugly part. Let's see if we can just get through this quickly. I have asked all of my friends who've seen a presentation like this, I've asked them all, what do you think about me leaving this part out? Because I really like to leave this part out. For me, and I'm not sure that it's good for the audience to know either. I'm not doing this because I want you to feel sorry for anybody. I don't want that. I don't want that. So what do you think about me leaving this out? And to a person, they've told me, no, you got to leave it in. So I leave it in, but let's see if I can get through it quickly. Meet my son. Everybody say hello, Travis. Hello, Travis. Yeah, I know he would appreciate that. Travis was a good kid, smart kid, good-looking kid, had friends. The problem that Travis had to deal with was he was extremely dyslexic. And so smart kid, but he never really read above about a third grade level. And so every day he'd go to school, they'd put him in, it's special classes, not special classes, but special classes where other people were having reading difficulties. And in school, the issue is how well do you read? So every day that he would go to school, you can't tell the difference between Monday and Tuesday, but Monday and Friday, or the first of the month to the first of the next month, or September to March. Those are times that you can really tell a period of growth. And all of his friends got better a day at a time, a day at a time, a day at a time. But every Friday morning, Travis started off the same place he left off the previous Friday morning. He never got any better, and he wasn't going to get any better. Pulling words off the page was not his gift. And so when he was about to turn 18, I got a call from the school district. And they said, what would you think about Travis dropping out of school? Because it's not going to, I had the same reaction you just felt. Not my kid. I had the same reaction. But we talked about it, and I thought about it. And the difference would be this. If Travis could get through his life where reading wasn't the barometer that measured every day, he just clean the slate so he doesn't have to go to school and fail every day. Every day he fails, and everybody knows it. They like him. He's a nice guy. But every day he's going to fail again, and that has an impact on your self-image. So I thought about it and decided, there's something to be said for this. Why don't I just clean the slate, start fresh, where he doesn't have to fail every day. So I signed the paper so he could drop out of school. He got a job at Kmart, stocking shelves. I don't know how. I don't know. You got to read above the third grade level to stock shelves. But he got a job, and they liked him, and then he got a better job, and then he got a better job after that. And then he started working at a consumer electronics store, and they stocking shelves from the back, and they liked him, and they brought him out on the sales floor, and the customers liked him, and so they moved him. He's now working on the sales floor, and what they would do is he'd make a sale, and then the process was that you take the customer and the product over to the cash register, and the cashier runs it up, so he doesn't have to work the cash register or make change or anything like that. Smart guy, couldn't get the numbers off the dollar bills. So this was working so well that when there's a brand new shopping mall opening in San Diego County, in Escondido, this store is opening a brand new store at a brand new mall. They need a manager there, and they hired Travis to manage the store. It was a colossal bad idea. Because if you're going to manage a store, you have to be able to read. You read the reports, you read the demands from the central office, you do sales reports, you do product evaluations, you do customer reports, you evaluate your employees. He couldn't do any of that, and they didn't know that. But that's what turns out why he wasn't calling them back when they were calling him, asking where the reports are. That's why he wasn't calling back. And they figured it out after a very short time, and they fired him, which is exactly what they should have done. I wish they had never offered him the job in the first place. I wish that had happened. But once they find out, you can't have a manager who can't read. You just can't do that. So they let him go. And then, in a matter of days, it was about 3 days from top to bottom, that the wheels had fallen off his world. And what do you do now? He saw himself sinking back into those days in high school and junior high where he was failing day after day after day, and he just couldn't handle that anymore. So we lost him. So he and I are going to be buried together. I bought a stone for me, and I put his name on that. Neither one of us is there, obviously. Right? Yeah. But he's not there either. But I have his things, and when I'm there, I already bought the stone. When it comes my turn, then I have his things set aside so that they can bury. I have a shirt and a watch and some things of his and that I kept, and so that I can be buried with those. But there's one other thing. We had him cremated. It was the right thing to do. He'd been gone for about 10 days before we found him. And there wasn't as much to put together for a casket and such. So I'm going to go down to, I need to go down to the ocean again. The last one dried up. And you just, get a vial, baby food jar, or a test tube with a cork in it, and some ocean water. And there's, so many parts per billion. That's where the ashes were scattered out at sea. And so I can say that, chances are, as much as anything, that he is inside with this seawater. And then I'll put that in there with me. So what do we learn from that? We learn that that puts a face on it, but we learn that we're losing our kids. These numbers are very hard to read, so I'm just going to call this out to you right here. All of these yellow, all of these yellow right here. Don't run away from me just because you're yellow. These right here, there's one over here, one over there. These are the 5 most common causes of death that are non-natural. Now, natural death means heart disease, influenza, heart attacks, a natural cause of death. Is it fair to say that 10-year-olds don't die of old age? So when you see the younger ages here, those are the actual causes of death, not not the non-natural deaths right here. So you see right here, that right there is the age group of 10 to 14 years old. Suicide is number 2. When you get to 15 to 19 years old, suicide is pushed aside by the red, and the red is homicide. Kids that are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, and hormones are going crazy, and they have access to guns, they are killing each other faster than they're killing themselves. But then, these guys, the ones who do the homicide, start going to jail, so there are fewer numbers on the street, and suicide picks up, and except for right down here, that's 65 to 74, and the purple is for falling. The most common cause of death, not counting heart disease and influenza and old age, the most common cause of death for people once you hit 75 is falling down. I presume not because they fell down, but whatever they hit their head on the way when they fell down. Falling down, not off a balcony, because they probably don't go near the balconies, but hitting their heads on something. That means anybody have relatives that are 75 or older, wrap them up in bubble wrap. Yeah.